Okay, I'd like to move on to Working Group 2. Lisanne, good to see you online this afternoon. We have a few copies of the Working Group 2 booklet here on the table. And it's weighing the table down for sure. But please do start sharing your share, and I'm delighted to welcome.
Thank you very much, and sorry for speaking before my turn, but I will share my screen. Let's see if it works. I'm delighted to be here with everyone to share our progress on Working Group 2. I'm hoping my share screen. Okay, thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and in addition to sharing our thoughts on and results and outcomes of Working Group 2, I was mostly also interested in introducing you to the people of Working Group 2, because cost actions are really about networking and about finding people who want to work on the same topics or who have expertise on certain topics. So therefore, my presentation will focus a lot also on the people. All of these people know that I will be doing this today in this way. So you are also very welcome to reach out to them based on this presentation if you feel like their profile or their experience and expertise is interesting to you. So as Martin is saying, the main outcome of our book, or the main output was of our working group, was this book, The Regenerative Design in Digital Practice, a handbook for the built environment. It is quite heavy, but that's because more than 60 people actually contributed to the book, both from academia and from practice. It's been read over 17,000 times online. You can download it for free on the Restore website and ResearchGate. And I will structure the presentation based on the chapters of the book, because they are mainly also the working lines that our worker group was based on. So the first chapter of the book really follows quite logically from Working Group 1. So from the work that Martin Brown has mostly also been involved in and leading, together with Edeltraud. So the first chapter is about regenerative design definitions for designers. So basically it starts with these outlines of the Living Building Challenge, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the Paris Climate Agreement. And it defines these 3 pillars that are used to cover the scope of regenerative design, let's say. And these 3 pillars I will talk about in the coming chapters. And it is mostly argued in this chapter that the inclusion of science and digital tools in designs should converge towards design solutions where a lot of these very transdisciplinary goals, like outdoor comfort, indoor well-being, circular economy, etc., are negotiated in an integral way. And that the chapter, in addition, the chapter also presents some barriers to implementation. The main person I want to introduce, but for this setting, it's a bit strange to introduce him, but Martin Brown in this case was very instrumental in our working group as well. And so he was really the person bringing on definitions such as the donut economics, which this picture is from, but also eco-seva concepts and the pillars of regenerative design. But I don't have to introduce him further in this context, I think. So I will move on to Emanuele Naboni, who is an associate professor at the University of Parma in Italy. Is also affiliated to KDK in Denmark. So his work and also his contribution, his work mainly focuses on parametric modeling and big data. So on really on these digital tools that are able to work with big data sets and combining data from very different fields in design processes. So in the book, he mainly contributed on those topics, and also in terms of architecture in extreme environments. So it's basically a kind of an extreme way of climate adaptation, let's say, because it was in areas, for example, where there was very extreme pollution or very extreme weather conditions, and how the design could then, how regenerative design can be facilitated in those places to overcome these extreme conditions. And he is also a chief editor of the book that I just presented together with me. So then my time to present myself briefly. I'm an assistant professor building performance at TU Eindhoven, and I mainly work on using parametrics simulations to do optimizations, mostly of housing renovation, so how to make the existing building stock more sustainable. And I also have a focus on energy modeling and urban energy modeling, and on circularity and LCA. So also how to incorporate life cycle assessment, which basically is the integration of not just energy related impacts, but also material related impacts and transportation and construction activities in general, how to look at those impacts in a holistic way. My contribution to the book was also mainly in that area, and in addition in the best practices, which is the last chapter that I will talk about. So these were some more overarching introductions of the book, because workgroup chapter 1 was also very overarching. So now we go into the more in-depth discussion. So the first chapter, the second chapter is about the tools and data for holistic modeling, and it's about simulating regenerative futures. So it's about these novel computational tools that are out there. A lot of them I already discussed. So basically, it's about how tracking both local and more regional climate flows of data concerning the climate, the ecosystem, the flow of materials and emissions, but also data related to human health and etc., is integrated in these digital tools. And the people working mostly on this, contributed mostly on these topics. The first is Terri Peters, who's an assistant professor building performance and well-being at Ryerson University in Canada. She's also a registered architect in the UK and has a PhD on architecture from Aarhus School of Architecture in Denmark. She also wrote a very interesting book on computing the environment, which mainly also talks a lot about the use of these different tools. And in addition to that, she contributed to the book mostly in terms of the design for the real practice case studies, where she showed both the outcome as well as the tools that were used to design those real life cases. And one of them, for example, the picture on the left, is a children's hospital and how it was designed, optimizing a lot of regenerative targets, including, for example, light and energy, using these advanced simulation tools. And the second person who was really critical to this work package is Clarice Bleil de Souza. She's an associate professor of design decision making at the Welsh School of Architecture. And her main work revolves around how these different kinds of tools and modeling are used in decision making. And as such, for example, one of her main contributions was about, we organized a summer school in Malaga in Spain, where a lot of teams of students were asked to design a regenerative project in an existing neighborhood in that city. And they were using these various advanced computational tools and data flows. And Clarice basically monitored and tracked their decision making and how the tools were used in their decision making processes. So the next chapter, so that's the third chapter, is on climate and energy for regenerative urban design, local context, adaptation, and resilience. So it is very much focused on the interaction with the local climate. So it focuses both on the indoor comfort, so and indoor energy use, but also on urban microclimates and how design can be used to create better outdoor comfort, and how regenerative design can be resilient to climatic events, and how to optimize and reduce heating and cooling loads. Let's see. Yes, and even related to aspects such as restoring local ecosystems when it comes to this chapter, and also concerning things like energy exchange with the surrounding built environment, and storage of excess renewable energy, etc. So it's more of a context-related view of these intertwined topics. For example, the people working in this chapter, one of them is Chokhachian. I'm sorry, I always mispronounce his name. He's an architect and university lecturer, building technology and climate responsive design in Munich. And one of his, he works on tools to evaluate the urban microclimate and outdoor thermal comfort. And he specialized on applying also machine learning methods to urban performance models. And what you see here on this graph is called a climate walk. And at first I was perhaps a bit skeptical of this, but in fact, it is a really wonderful tool that we also applied in Malaga, as you can see in the image. So basically it is taking a walk through the city while being equipped with all kinds of measurement instruments, and both gathering the quantitative data based on those measurements, but also the experiential data from the people. And this way, you can actually experience very different urban microclimates in the city in a very efficient way and gather a lot of data without the need to have continuous monitoring. So it provides a kind of a snapshot of the city. But if you do it quite systematically for example, with a group of people or multiple times, it actually provides some insight in the areas of the city where there really are some critical issues that you otherwise may not have detected. So it's a good way to spot those areas. And the second person really active in this work package is Luca Finnochiaro. He's an associate professor climate and built forms at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. And in his contributions to the book, he mainly focuses on basically two case studies. So the one that you see here is the Zero Energy Building Living Lab that is built on the campus at NTNU. It was a proposal for the solar decathlon. And it actually applies both passive design strategies and renewable energy strategies with very careful also material choices and biophilic design choices, so that you do have a strong connection to the outside and that you have a very natural material use. And the other case study that he actually presented is a heritage regeneration project. So it was a very old building in which the reuse of the old materials and the restoration of the old building was critical. And what I thought was very interesting to see is that the similar approaches that he uses in this case study, which is evidently a brand new building, but the same strategies in terms of passive design and integration of renewables and conscious material choices can also be seen in this heritage case study. Then the fourth chapter of the book is about carbon and ecology in the design process. So it's about environmental impact assessments. Let me just quickly check the time. So it's about the environmental impacts in combination with the circular economy aspects and bio-based materials. And for example, a lot of the chapter goes into life cycle assessment and how this tool, which especially at the start of the project, because also a lot has changed during the project, but how this tool can be made more accessible, because initially it's actually not very accessible. But we found some innovations, for example, certain tools and software projects that are being developed where you can integrate life cycle assessment in the design process, even, for example, in tools like SketchUp, which are used in the very early design phase. We found also tools where you can do a parametric study of LCA, which basically means exploring many different design options to optimize the environmental impact of the building, and also to link both urban scale LCA and building scale LCA. And as there also is a strong connection between these topics, so between the environmental impact and LCA, circularity and bio-based materials, those aspects were also analyzed, because there often is still a mismatch between no consensus on how, for example, the benefits of circularity can also be translated into LCA assessments. So that's basically the focus of this chapter. Dr. Catherine Wolf is very relevant for me to mention here. She's an assistant professor of design and construction management at University of Technology in Delft. Her work is mainly focusing on life cycle assessment of structures and on the reuse of structures. So this is, for example, a case study where in this stadium, she assessed the reuse of the structure and the environmental impact of the reuse of the structure. So in her contributions, she also talks about this match between circularity and LCA and how those can be better integrated. Yes. And she also developed a benchmark tool for LCA. So one of the big issues is that, like, for example, in energy, we have very clear standards of what an energy efficient building should look like what is energy efficient, or etc. But we do not really have the same thing for material impact. And of course, in a regenerative design, you would want the impact to not be negative, but to have a positive impact on the environment, also from a material perspective. And she actually created a sort of database of projects where on which a benchmark can be based on, like, what should we consider to be what kind of impact should we expect from buildings. Then we have Antonino Marvuglia, who is a senior research and technology associate at LIST in Luxembourg. And his contributions to the book mainly are about territorial LCA. So it's an LCA of cities or districts. And he describes processes for different methods for coupling, for example, GIS modeling, so geographic information system modeling, with life cycle assessment tools. So particularly on the larger scale LCA, so also not just focusing on buildings, but for example, also focusing on other kinds of environmental impacts of the city. His contributions were mainly focused. I just quickly wanted to also show you two other examples. So this is one with a parametric LCA, so where you can see on the top a lot of design variations can be explored, and these are just 8 out of what I believe were hundreds of simulations exploring different scenarios for the design of a building, including, for example, shading devices and structural components, and using it to optimize both the material impact, so the impact of the material use, and the operational impact of the energy use. And then the other example I wanted to show you is CALA, C-A-L-A-A, is the tool that actually is this SketchUp integrated lifecycle assessment tool. So if you're interested in that, the book also has a contribution on that. Then the third and last pillar that I will be presenting is human well-being via certification and tools, comfort, health, satisfaction, and well-being. So this chapter basically describes firstly those definitions, so comfort, health, satisfaction, and well-being, and describes how in a regenerative building these concepts are approached from what is called a salutogenic approach instead of a reductionist approach. So traditionally we think of things like avoiding ill health, so avoiding pollutants in a building, and a regenerative paradigm is about how to create buildings that promote health. So not just buildings that avoid ill health, but buildings that promote more health. So that's more from a theoretical perspective. And then in addition to the theoretical perspective, the chapter goes into different standards and certification and tools that can be applied to measure health. And it talks about the well-building standard as one of these examples. And also one critical difference from this chapter between the others is that while the others focus mainly on simulation and modeling tools, this chapter really focuses also on measurements. So not just on how to model health and well-being, but also on real-time measurements and how they can be used to monitor basically health and well-being. Then I would like to present two people who are very critical here. So first, Dr. Angela Loder, who is a Vice President Research at the International Well Building Institute. Her contribution mainly talked about the evolution of health and the understanding of health and how it changed over the different ages. And in addition to that, she focused on the different certification methods and tools. And then Dr. Sergio Altomonte, who is a professor of architectural physics in the Faculty of Architecture in Louvain. And he mainly focused in his contributions on the intersection between indoor environmental quality, building systems, and human comfort, health, and well-being. And so his contribution was more on from the theoretical perspective and these different definitions, but also on how those can be operationalized in measurements and indicators, let's say. And two additional things I would like to show is just how I should have moved this slide, sorry. This one is about the digital tools. So then the last chapter is about the case studies of regenerative design, from principles to realization. So in this last chapter, we wanted to highlight some real life case studies of regenerative design, where we present basically we both analyze how the case studies connect to the theory and also derive new theory from the case study. And in almost all of the case studies that we present, multiple pillars are of course covered in a holistic and integrated manner in these cases. I think I'm running out of time, so I just quickly want to show you that in the book we present these cases and we present also some of their let's say how they perform. So this is considered the most sustainable office building in the world. There is not like in the structural elements, it's only bio-based materials, so no glue, no screws, nothing. The building produces 50% more energy than it needs. Also, things like, for example, in the landscape, a lot of biodiversity measures were taken to really be a place that is very friendly to animals and to insects. The water in the building water management in the building is completely sustainable. I can't really go into a lot of detail there, but it's really an excellent case study to explore in terms of holistic way. And then this is, for example, also a case study from Lacaton Vassal, which won a lot of awards by adding this extension to an existing flat. And the extension actually provides a sort of biophilic outdoor area, but also really reduces the energy need of the dwellings behind it. And the chapter also provides simulation and modeling on how this award-winning structure was designed. And the same is true for some other case studies like these two case studies. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
That's wonderful, Lisanne. I think you took a minute or two over your time. Probably just to avoid having a question thrown at you. But I just wonder what's next for the work you've done in the WG2?
Yeah, so we are actually still working on some follow-up projects. So for example, we are now working on a 10 questions paper for regenerative cities. So we are basically also collaborating with Workgroup 5, where we worked on scale jumping. But the paper is really on how digital tools can be used also on a city scale. And we have many of the people working in Workgroup 2 also involved in that paper. And another thing is we are working on some follow-up project proposals to get some, for example, we are working with Sergio Altomonte and Antonino Marvuglia and myself are working on a proposal on the territorial LCA of cities and combining it with urban microclimate studies. So those were also two critical pillars of regenerative design. And we are now working on applying for funding for a few PhDs. We are actually thinking about setting up an ITN network, which is Irene Krie Training Network of PhDs, where we would like to set up sort of long-term collaborations between a range of institutes, knowledge institutes in Europe, to set up a PhD training network and to really facilitate more exchange of knowledge between these institutes by these PhDs. So those are just some of the things we are working on. Unfortunately, they are not really all materialized yet, but of course, well, Restore has just ended, so we will hopefully get some funded.
It's good. Wish you all the best with that, and look forward to the outcomes when you do publish.
I forgot to mention, Martin, that of course we also have a project we are working on together. So yes.
Yeah, symbiotic construction. Yeah, yeah, loving it. Yeah, many thanks, Lisanne. We're going to take a slight change to the agenda. Indra has to leave shortly to lecture, so she's asked if she could go before the first interval. So, Indra, welcome virtually to Sabden. And if you'd like to share your screen and take us through WG3.
So, hello, Martin. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy and honored to be here and share the work of the Working Group 3. And as you see already on the first page, we was from one side small group and from other side quite large group, an international one. So I will go within my story quite similarly as Lisanne previously did. So I'll try to go through our results and our thoughts, what we was summarizing and concluding in our working group booklet that is available online. So the idea with what we started our work was how asking our questions, like very general, how can a building be built and operated in regenerative way, and how can regenerative principles be integrated in the construction and operation process, and how can to realize a paradigm shift from business as usual to regenerative construction process. And yes, there is a big dreams when we are designing and putting our imagination, reimagining world. But when we are coming to construction operation, as within this working group, we became very focused on concepts, on paradigms, on understanding how real life is going in this part. So the easiest answer for our working group questions would be to go through, yes, so sorry. So the easiest answer would be to achieve it through integration of restorative and regenerative principles into the construction operation process. However, the current state of the art in the construction operation do not include or truly only include partly sustainable and regenerative values. And there are really a number of gaps, difficulties, barriers, and opportunities. So our working group focused on sustainable regenerative and construction sector for buildings, landscape, and infrastructure across the spectrum of sustainability values along the real estate life cycle. So the key phases was procurement, considering what follows design stage and precedes construction phase, including bidding, tendering, procurement. Construction, from the preparation of the site up to the management of the construction site, including materials, technologies used during the construction process. Operation, starting from commissioning and going through the operation and maintenance of the building. And future life, considering what happens happening to the building after its preliminary life, including refurbishment, retrofitting, reuse, adaptation, and in worst case, dismantling. So there are three major challenges and transformation of construction real estate industries regarding construction strategies, facilities management, and historic buildings and existing building stock. And currently, the construction sector is one of the industries generating the greatest environmental impact, including carbon emissions that impacts climate change. Thus, the shift from regenerative construction strategies to positive net environmental impact is urgent. So using regenerative materials and regenerative technologies encourage all the stakeholders of the construction sector to move further, shifting from implementing regenerative or less bad strategies to other strategies that could reach net zero carbon emission and even provide positive net environmental impact. The second step is from classical facilities management in one of the buildings, in one building towards urban facilities management. The importance of the usage phase along the life cycle of the built environment and solutions in sustainable and regenerative management of properties and neighborhoods is needed. Also, the facility management during planning and construction is well known. It is still not applied frequently. User and operator processes should be considered and simulated and optimized, including measures that seem simple, such as efficient way of putting new buildings or buildings that have been renovated to the core into operation. Urban facilities management would require a paradigm shift in real estate management, new processes, contractual models in letting management, and changed attitudes of owners and investors should be established in order to promote regenerative sustainability. The third level is from regenerative drivers only in new buildings towards regenerative drivers for historic buildings and existing building stock. Historic buildings and environments can become a driver for regenerative sustainability. The heritage adoption is an efficient strategy to trigger climate change action and community resilience while meeting United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Built environment professions are urged to reflect on the potential impacts on heritage buildings, which may already be subject to strong pressure and risks related to decay, lack of maintenance, redundancy, on top of other vulnerabilities such as hydrological instability, depopulation, abandonment. So, for using regenerative materials and regenerative technologies, and encourage all the stakeholders of the construction sector to move further, shifting from implementing all these implementing degenerative or less bad strategies to other strategies that could provide positive net environmental impact. Restore were in line with global policies and with establishment of the new EU policies. As you know, European Commission only on December 11, 2019 presented the European Green Deal, a roadmap for making the EU economy sustainable by turning climate and environmental challenges into opportunities across all policy areas and making transition just and inclusive for all. So our working group and others were in line to these the same thinking that's in the world and in the Europe. Also, during a workshop of Restore Midterm conference on 40th of March 2019 in Bolzano, Italy, participants were divided in 17 teams and each dedicated to discuss a single SDG in order to check and redefine Restore strategy to make it more consistent and coherent, and also to keep in mind all SDG goals, as well as to develop list of concrete SDG goals related Restore tasks to be planned for the next months in order to strengthen the action's effectiveness in pursuing these main goals. In 2019, in March, there was a training school in Bolzano when we developed and worked on all these topics, and also did a case study around Bolzano best practices. How that all processes of construction and operation fit into like processes from industries. So there is a link between all working groups of working group 1, working group 2, and working group 3, and mapped against the Riga Plan of Work Strategies 2013. So there you can see our place and understanding of the processes. Restore contribution to regenerative procurement that is published in our booklet available online are proposed how to build bridge for transition between a regenerative design vision and realization of that vision. The procurement process have to be seen as invaluable tool to raise awareness and force change through the supply chain. Sustainable procurement standards like BREEAM, LEED, DNGP, Living Building Challenge, ISO, SDGs, and others were scrutinized and listed for use for the users. There was developed early contractor involvement as a critical approach where a contractor skills are introduced early in a project to bring regenerative sustainability and design buildability and cost efficiency to the construction phase. Also, it's essential to establish collaborative principles as early as possible and develop procurement for circular economy. Sustainable value management and value engineering were proposed as exercise, and it hopefully might make the world a better place. There was developed bidding a regenerative cost sustainability model that compares state-of-the-art today's approach with a vision how that should be made for tomorrow, and it introduces sustainable profits, fixed, agreed what the organization needs to develop sustainability, to invest in training, research, and development instead of existing profit. There was proposed sustainable margins, the correct level of margins for the project, ensuring correct sustainable infrastructure, accommodation, facilitation, training, continuous improvement. There was introduced sustainable costs, the real costs, the lean costs to doing the tasks with no historic unproductive elements, and sustainability opportunity costs, the balance derived from any remaining of MUDA 3, ideally targeted at 100% of the original MUDA costs. So as you see, there is a concept of MUDA, which is coming from the Japanese term identifying several forms of waste: transport, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, defect, and skills that are central to lean management systems. There were developed tool pre-qualification questionnaire to raise awareness and force change through the supply chain. To complete work and to provide opportunity for the supply chain to demonstrate a track record through the submission of evidence. All players, contractors, subcontractors, suppliers should go through this tool. Restore contribution to regenerative construction scrutinized incorporation of regenerative sustainability through key aspects of the construction process: materials, technologies, and tools. There were a working group survey developed to understand the current situation of sustainability in the construction sector, to identify barriers, challenges, and opportunities for implementation of emerging materials, technologies, and increase awareness and knowledge of sustainable construction in Europe. The number of gaps, difficulties, and opportunities became evident. The overall conclusions are that advanced and emerging materials and technologies are really poorly used within the construction sector, as very few respondents claim to use them in more than half of their projects. These materials and technologies have a higher rate of application in new building construction rather than in building renovation. And the recommendations were to increase awareness and knowledge among construction actors of the different possible regenerative materials, tools, and technologies, develop guidelines and manuals, develop specific regulations, and promote construction of regenerative buildings and efficient economy incentives. Restore contribution to regenerative operation and maintenance is how facility management can preserve and regenerate the built environment. There were proposed 3 steps from regenerative building drivers towards regenerative drivers of historic buildings and existing building stock. The first step is proposed integration of facility management during planning and construction. User and operation processes should be considered in early stages. Step 2, during operation, adjusted settings of the building services like heating and ventilation not only save energy but also increase user satisfaction and health. And step 3, shift from classical view of facilities management for the individual building to the neighborhood level and even entire city. There were proposed social, ecological, and economical targets of renovative facility management, developed guidelines to change regenerative operations, maintenance, and use. Regenerative construction and operation and restore contribution to future circular life. There was revised paradigms and concepts. One of the key obstacles was analyzed human mind and habits, our perception of waste aesthetics, and our hygiene approaches to the waste. The concept of that building users use buildings until they are worn out, are no longer usable, is challenged by the application of range of innovative regenerative incentives, including circular economy, cradle to cradle, and buildings as material banks. It's crucial to understand the rhythm of the place, and there was questioned issue or question of sapient buildings that can learn. For historic buildings, there was proposed adaptation and also development of more details on urban mines. There were proposed how to revise and rethink, reduce waste, reuse waste, and waste as resource. The proposal was to push for the implementation of circular economy thinking and reimagine waste futures. There was developed roadmap for implementation of circular economy. And so what's next after this all work? The European Commission presented in 14th of October 2020 and launched design phase on January 18th, 2021, New European Bauhaus. So the European Commission in this design phase invites to connect what is already out there to see where and how the new European Bauhaus can accelerate, concretize, and materialize good ideas. And I believe that we have developed during our process really excellent suggestions, ideas, and our brainstorming, what's not even written in a booklets, shows a large variety of motivation to live in a better world. So there is a tool developed, and I would invite everyone to participate and share these good ideas and share examples. There is possibility to share examples, share challenging needs, and also ideas that might trigger like broader transformation. So,
just 1 minute,
yes,
Indra.
yes, thank you, Martin. And as previously there was asked question, what's next? So I put that one as a closing mark. And my personal contribution is that now I'm working together within IFLA Europe, International Federation of Landscape Architects, and that is now a partner for New European Bauhaus, and trying to implement all good ideas within this process in landscape architecture field. And also we are representing a part for New European Bauhaus Collective, where are 12 European umbrella organizations of architects, spatial planners, educators, and cultural organizations that also work as a partners to promote and accelerate changes. So thank you very much. And if questions, please.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing it, Indra. So I've just been directed to what camera to look at here. So, okay. I did put a note in the chat box that we can download all the Restore publications from the website. Yeah, and I know there's lots of work which is spinning out of the working group 3. I'm using some of them in construction work, for example. Okay, we're going to take a short break, a short interval. Apologies for earlier that we didn't share the sound or stream the sound for the WG0 video, so we're going to re-show that one. And as Alison mentioned when we were doing the introduction, if you're here today, it's a bright sunny day. The sound of curlews out in the field, absolutely wonderful, very evocative sound. It's the sound of Lancashire, Morecambe Bay, and etc. It's wonderful. So we're going to show you a quick video on that. So it's a 10-minute break. It's a comfort break. Stand up, take a glass of water, and be back at 15:35, 16:35, wherever you may be.